This segment of the Bass, Kayak, and Beers podcast is sponsored in part by Dark Horse Tackle. Go to darkhorsetackle.com and use promo code BKB5 to save an extra $5 when you build your own box. Douglas Outdoors. Serious rods for serious anglers. Norsk Lithium. The lithium kayak battery you need is just a click away. Go to norsklithium.com. Catch Outdoors, the official measuring board for all 3 national trails. Go to catchoutdoors.com and use promo code BKB5 to save 5% on your next online purchase. What is going on, everyone? Hope you all having a great Thursday. Welcome once again to the Bass, Kayak, and Beers podcast. It's your boy Armando, and we're going to have a great episode for you guys today. We have Robert Randolph and Cam Steele from the Faith and Fishing podcast. 2 of my favorite people in the kayak fishing community. Love what they're doing with the podcast, and always fun to have them on the show. I try to make it a point of each year, at least once a year, have them come up to the podcast and just talk in general, talk bass fishing, talk the hottest topics in the kayak bass fishing. So with that, we're gonna be talking a lot about some of recent developments in kayak bass fishing and just some fun conversation. It's not gonna be just drama or anything like that, but just good old fun conversation about why we love kayak bass fishing and why it's amazing, and bass fishing in general, or fishing in general. These guys don't only fish for bass, but they're pretty good fishermen for other multi-species. So before we do, thanks as always to our sponsor, Norsk Lithium. You can visit the link on our profile and check out their amazing batteries. I love Norsk Lithium. It's been my battery for the last 6 months, and I'm proud to be and privileged to be with them. Great batteries. Love that USB ports where you can just connect directly your phone, your GoPro, without having it to really hardwire. And they're amazing batteries. Douglas Outdoors, amazing rods. In a couple of weeks, I should be getting the new Era rods from Douglas Rods. I'll be reviewing those. There's great rods that are $99, so less than $100. Good quality rods. If you ever used a Douglas rod, especially the X Matrix, you know those rods are amazing. And I enjoy using those rods. So go check out Douglas Outdoors. Dark Horse Tackle, great monthly subscription box. And if you are not one of those people that love monthly subscription boxes, you can still take advantage of Dark Horse Tackle. Just hit the link on my profile, or go to darkhorsetackle.com. Use promo code BKB5. You build your own box, which inherently you save like $10, $15. And if you use BKB5, you earn another $5 off. So you save somewhere between $20, $25 by using that promo code, while only investing like $31.99. So I always say it. Like, if you go to Bass Pro Shop and you want to save $15 on their club membership, you have to invest like at least $100. And to think that you can just go to Dark Horse Tackle, build your own box, use that promo code BKB5, and save like $15, $25 depending on what baits you choose, and while only investing $30, it's amazing. And also Catch Outdoors, great products, great accessories. You can also use promo code BKB5 and save $5 of any product that you buy online. I also team up with Mariner Sales starting earlier this month. So go check out Mariner Sales. If you live in the DFW area, it's the biggest kayak dealership as far as kayak inventory and accessories. They're the best. You can also buy online if you're out of town. Go to marinersales.com. Well, with that being said, let's bring in our guest for today, Cam Steele, Robert Randolph from the Faith and Fishing podcast. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time to join the podcast. By the way, before I let you guys introduce yourself, if for those that are watching or on the live show, YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, make sure to drop your comments, ask any questions. We'll make sure Me or my guests will answer any of your questions. But with that being said, Cam, let's start with you, man. Congratulations. You're about to be a father for the second time. What is it, like a week away from now?
Uh,
A little bit more?
Technically somewhere around 4 weeks, but it could be a lot shorter than that. So
Man,
yeah, we're excited. And my 3-year-old is super excited about being a big brother. So we're we're looking forward to that. Nowhere near
congrat-
ready, but we won't be. So we learned that the first time.
try to get as much fishing as you can this next few weeks because after that, it's done, buddy. But for a good reason, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I'm Cam and I have ADHD and I'm sitting in a spinny chair, so hopefully I don't make anybody dizzy.
The host of the Faith and Fishing podcast, and also Robert Randolph. Robert, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. I appreciate you having us on.
Uh, man, I appreciate you guys coming on to the podcast. So let me ask you this, because I know that's not Faith and Fishing attire, but so you fish boat docks now? Is that what it is?
Yeah, we talked a little bit in the pre-show, and yeah, as soon as they suspended James Watson, I sent him a message, and I was like, "Dude, you better start making hats and shirts because you're about to sell out of them." And I don't know how many he's sold since then, but he's probably made a decent amount of money on his hats and shirts. So, I just kind of support what he stands for, and I feel like he speaks the truth on a lot of things, and he says a lot of things a lot of people don't feel like they can say. And I think we need some more dudes like that. So, yeah, I like fishing bow docks.
Finally get to wear it here on the. You were like, man, if I
Yeah,
could
yeah.
just go to a
Well,
podcast as
I
a special
said,
guest and wear it.
yeah, I said earlier, we were in the green room. I said, I really don't feel right wearing it in the Faith and Fishing podcast. I was like, but tonight we're not on the Faith and Fishing podcast, so I can fish boat docks here all I want to.
Man, it's yeah, that's an interesting rabbit hole. I don't follow. I've never been one to consider bass fishing as a spectator sport. I grew up watching, and I don't even remember it, but my mom would always tell you, and I've said this on the podcast millions of times, but that when I was little, she would wake up like on Sunday mornings, and I'll be glued to my TV, sitting on the floor on the sofa with my little tackle box and my rod. By the way, I still have that tackle box. She kept it when she came to visit me here in Texas, Puerto Rico. She brought it, and it still had all the lures, and that I hadn't opened it for like literally probably 40 years.
Wow, that's awesome.
So it was cool. So yeah. But I mean, I don't even remember watching. I would ask you, it's like, what was I watching? I imagine it was something like, some like Sunday morning outdoor show on ESPN, or, Bill Dance or something like that. But yeah, man, I would be glued to that TV, according to her, with my tackle box, my rod, and just watch TV. It's crazy, man. Those like core
Yeah.
memories that I don't even remember I had.
Yeah,
I mean, that was our YouTube then, is Saturday
Yeah.
morning, Sunday morning. I mean, we wanted to learn something about fishing. That's what you had to do, other than, your dad or your grandpa or something like, or somebody showing you, your maybe older sibling or something. But, that and Field and Stream and
Yeah.
Magazine, that's kind of where we learned what we learned. I mean, that was our social media, internet, YouTube was magazine and TV.
and thanks to Bill Dance's blooper episodes, we got the fail videos too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love those.
Yeah. Who would think he was ahead of his time now when you think about it?
Hmm.
Now it's everything. I've I've said this, and I don't want to sound uh, like uh like I predicted the future. I think it was kind of obvious, but like 5 years ago, I said, like, cable TV is gonna be done in 5 years, and it pretty much is. Um, I don't watch TV anymore unless it's a streaming service. For the most part, I just watch YouTube, like highlights of either sports or sports show or fishing stuff. But I hardly watch unless I'm watching a good TV series that I'm into, or I'm watching live sports like the NBA playoffs right now. This year, I don't know why I feel like the NBA playoffs have been amazing. Um, But other than that, I mean, I don't watch cable TV anymore. It's like, to me, it's like, what's the point of it anymore?
Yeah, I'm definitely the same way. I don't know about Cam, but every time, if we turn on the TV, it's to turn on something that we have set to record. Like we've watched Survivor since almost it started as a family, and the kids watch it. So after dinner, a lot of times we'll turn Survivor on, but it's not on live TV. It's something we've had set to save on the DVR or YouTube TV or whatever, and we'll watch that. But other than that, I'm the same way. I'm pulling up what I want to watch on YouTube when I want to watch it, and there's all kinds of content on there, and anything you can imagine. I use it for work stuff too. I pull up stuff that I don't know at work, and most of the time there's a video on it.
Yep.
And I learn, I teach myself, I self educate myself to make myself better. And I think that's the way everybody's going. I know a lot of people, older people, probably still have cable TV, but as time rolls on and those people no longer are subscribed to cable, it's just gonna be one of those things that's gone.
Yep. What's your favorite content creator, Cam? Whether it's fishing or other stuff that you enjoy watching.
Favorite content creator. So right now, it's this guy. It's the Ants Canada YouTube channel, and he is from Canada, and he moved to Southeast Asia, and he builds all these like giant ant colonies in his ant room, and he ended up building this like 1,200 gallon vivarium, and it's a rainforest ecosystem in his house.
Oh, I've seen it. Yes.
And like I have been like just enamored with that. Every episode is like he's such a good like narrator and storyteller, and he keeps you on the edge of your seat, and you're so invested in it. And it's like, why am I so invested in this? But it's like I have to watch the next one. I have to watch the next one.
There's things that you go on rabbit holes that you're like,
It's
and then there's other stuff that comes up. Like people, that one thing that I've kind of have to obligate myself to not watch is reels, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, of just people fighting, or I don't know, like arguing or just behaving like the worst human beings you could be. And I'm like, why am I? It's just like you. There comes to a point where you're like, man, I'm filling my mind with junk. I have to like find something productive to watch instead of watching people get enraged, because it does affect your humor. And one of the things that I love about now with YouTube and all that is how you're able to learn to do bass fishing and kayak bass fishing and any other stuff. But really, for us that we love kayak bass fishing, to me that is a huge advantage. Like not having to, at least me, that I'm entering my fifth decade now in a couple of weeks. I feel like, man, back in the days, what do you have to go to a library and get an encyclopedia on how to bass fish? Like try to figure it out, or watch those shows on Sunday, and you could have missed them because back then there wasn't even like recording. So now it's just like you can just, whatever you have, even for work, like Robert said, it's like, man, how do I do this? Oh, let me just Google it or YouTube it, and it'll show a video of how to do it.
Yeah, and I'll touch on a lot of things that you just said right there and kind of unpack it. One of the things that Cam came up with this season for season 4 was to to try to make sure that not that we weren't doing this before, but we kind of put it top of the mind, and Cam especially, to put a positive message at the top
Yeah,
of what we're doing. And so we kind of try to talk in positive things, and we try to, not to say we won't touch on some of the controversy and some of the negative things. We'll give our viewpoint a lot of the times, but we're not going to get sucked into that. And just like you said, those reels, those shorts, I mean, you can sit there, and if you let yourself, you can spend 2 hours watching 15-second clips. And it is, I mean, that's the way it's designed, is to keep you going to
yeah.
that next thing. And so I agree with you 100% on that. And then, um, as far as the YouTube and learning stuff, and just, there's all kinds of content out there. But really, the positivity message, I have to take my hat off to Cam for this year. Kind of like, hey, this is kind of going to be our theme behind the theme is like, let's just make sure we kind of bring that positivity to the forefront. So
Yeah, I think that's important, especially with content creation. In this space of kayak bass fishing and bass fishing in general, like I have a podcast. There are times where I feel like, okay, this issue needs to be addressed, and sometimes you get that backlash from the audience, like why are we talking about this, or they don't want to hear it. Um, I think where you draw the line is like when you start attacking people. It's like that to me is like I can say, hey, I don't agree with what this person did. I feel like that was unfair, or I don't agree with this person getting disqualified. He didn't do anything wrong, or I don't agree with the new rules, or I do agree with the new rules. Whatever it is, you can express your opinion, especially if you can see how it might have a negative effect if it's not left unchecked or not talked about. But the flip side to that is you can always do it in a way where you're not attacking the other point of view. That, and I think that's the main difference. I think a lot of people don't get it, and I think a lot of content creators are just better off, either insulting Randy Blockett because they don't like his opinion. Whereas, well, you can just say your opinion without having to insult you, or vice versa. Somebody that insulting, I don't know, any fisherman that is in favor of forward facing sonar or whatever subject. I just say that because that seems to be like the most polarizing subject. Was like, okay, I have this opinion, fine, it's great. If you really feel like, for example, forward facing sonar is a detriment to the sport, then whether we agree with it or not, you can always say it without having to just insult the other point of view. I
Yeah,
think
for
that's
sure.
the main thing, and that's one thing that you guys I love about both of you, Cam and Robert, that you thread that line where you like we can talk about this without overstepping boundaries. And I grew up with this saying my mom and my dad used to say is like your right starts where the other people's end, like where your right start where your neighbor's ends. I don't know if that makes sense. I know in Spanish
oh yeah,
made
No,
sense.
yeah, I like that.
hmm absolutely. Yeah.
So
So
go ahead.
no, I'll kind of touch on a couple of those things, especially the forward-facing sonar. And this is kind of giving a sneak peek of the episode we just recorded last night. I thought, and I probably won't get his last name right, but Michael Ridenour,
Right
how
now.
he
Mm,
pronounce right
right
now.
now, yeah.
So, we had him on last night, and he was talking about Dale Hollow, and he was talking some about the Bassmasters in Texas on Possum Kingdom, and you know, we didn't really ask him any questions about forward-facing sonar, but throughout the conversation, he was referring to it and kind of his style of fishing, and I thought it was a um, very unique take that he has on forward-facing sonar because he's getting up into a lot of skinny, shallow water, and he's also using forward-facing sonar along with that style of fishing, which I don't see or hear of a lot. And I never even asked a question or touched on that because there were so many other facets of that conversation. But I did after the fact, kind of in my head, I was going back to it and I'm like, man, that is really, I think kind of the way moving forward because even you see these boat tournaments are a lot of them are being won on forward facing sonar, but then there are times now where you get in some river tournaments in there and it's not playing quite as much. But I think Michael had a great and has a great mindset of how to mix that forward facing sonar in with his shallow water style of fishing. And, to me, it was just kind of like a aha moment of, you know what? The shallow water fisherman and the forward facing sonar fisherman can walk hand in hand, and it's a tool to use for whatever style of fishing that you like to do. If you want to go shallow, it has its spot there. If you want to go offshore, obviously that's how most people use forward facing sonar. It definitely has its spot there. But I just thought his take on that was uh, was a little bit different, and it just kind of made me scratch my head and say, you know what? pretty good deal.
Cam, you wanted to add to that?
No, I don't really. I mean, forward facing. Just, I mean, it. I don't have a whole lot of opinions, good or bad. Just because I have no experience whatsoever with it. I will say it's an impressive technology.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's. Uh, yeah, I mean, I don't really have a ton of opinions on that. I mean, I'm not anti forward facing by any stretch of the imagination, but I will say it's priced me out for now. So
Yeah.
that's about where I stand.
Especially with a kid coming out, new
Oh,
kid, and a 3-year-old. No, I think the interesting thing about kayak bass fishing, and I'm not against it either way. To me, I've always said it kind of takes away from my enjoyment if I start using it. Me personally. Now, having said that, at some point I'm sure I'll get one, and maybe when I start using it, I'll be like, "Oh my god, this is the greatest thing ever." So I have the right to change my mind if that does in fact happen. But I think it's also my progression as an angler. It's like I want to kind of feel like I figured out stuff before I move into forward facing sonar. Me personally, again, I'm not against it. What's interesting in kayak bass fishing tournaments, I think it helps out more the anglers that don't use forward facing sonar. And the reason why, when you look at the Elite Series, there's the reason why it's called the Elite Series. These are the best for the best. A lot of them, we see it in Lake Fork this year in the Bassmaster Elite. Young guys coming out fresh out of college that are in touch with with technology more than myself. And I think I'm pretty handy with technology, but not as handy as I'm sure this late teens, early 20s young man and young woman that are getting into bass fishing. It's ingrained in their upbringing versus me learning it after I was out of high school, learning what an iPod is, even out of college, what an iPod is, a smartwatch, augmented reality kind of stuff like that. But when we go to kayak bass fishing, a lot of kayak bass fishermen that are tournaments are there not necessarily because they love they love fishing out of a kayak more than a boat. It's because they're more accessible. It's the price for a kayak is a fraction of what it would be for a boat. Initial purchases and maintenance and gasoline and all that. So I remember talking to Jeff Malott when he was on this podcast saying it's like the majority of tournament. We're not talking about the regular weekend warriors that love to go kayak bass fishing to just because it's their favorite pastime. We're talking about tournament anglers, people that go out there and try to catch a check and try to in one way or another live the dream of being a bass fisherman. The kayak is just their vessel to be a tournament bass fisherman because they don't want to spend the money on a boat. They understand the entry fees, everything that comes along with it. It's more like this is the best way for me to get into tournaments. So the using this technology, they're not at the same level. So I see a lot of anglers that are like getting into this, and I thinking to myself, having conversations with them, it's like, man, you're cheating yourself out of a check because while you are out there fishing, you could have been hitting the bank and catch five instead of just like trying to learn this technology. And let's face it, on a kayak, it's a lot harder, especially when we're talking about the best way to use forward facing sonar or the best application is open water. Well, open water, once past 10 a.m., especially on summer, wind starts kicking in. So unless you now have a 360 drive Hobie PA or you have a trolling motor or a spot lock motor, which is, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage by trying this technology. So I think it actually benefits guys that don't use forward facing sonar, the fact that it is allowed on tournaments. What do you think, Robert?
So, I agree with you 100%. I think the people that are successful using forward facing sonar are would be the same people that would be successful if it had never been invented. So, the people that learn to fish without it, and whether you're young or old, a lot of these young people, especially on the Elite Series, they kind of get pegged as, oh, well, here are these young guys, and they are these technology savvy guys that grew up with a phone in their hand and a screen in front of them all the time, which they did. My kids are no different. Um, they grew up with the technology of screens and having, I mean, our schools here issue them computers. I
Yeah.
mean, how crazy is that? Um, but at the same time, those young guys on the Elite Series, I've heard it over and over from older guys that are on the Elite Series on podcast or just, talking in general. Those guys can fish as well without
Yeah.
forward facing sonar. Like that is not their claim to fame. And a lot of people would have you believe that, oh, these guys came up and because they're technology, they're using that hand in hand with the knowledge that they gained from, really, they gained it from probably YouTube. And that is one key piece of these younger anglers, I think, that not a lot of people touch on. I've heard it. I listened to a podcast on the way to work today. It's the first fishing podcast I've listened to in probably 3 weeks because I've been super covered up at work. And honestly, going to work, I just been jamming out to music and not really kind of in my podcast groove, which is a 40-minute drive. But this morning, I'm like, okay, I got to get back into my fishing podcast thing. So I listened to one this morning, and they kind of touched on that same thing as these young hammers in the elites are, not only are they good on forward facing sonar, but if without it, they would still be competitive and still be at the top because all these older guys that were tournament fishing started YouTube channels and they started teaching people how
Yeah.
and what they were doing. And so this younger group of anglers came up taking all this media in of these anglers on YouTube that are putting information out there on techniques they're using, how they're doing this and how they're doing that. That's how I learned a lot. I mean, it's a huge shortcut. Now, you
Yeah.
still have to take that information. You still have to get on the water. You still have to make it work for you because as hard as I try, sometimes I can't catch other people's fish, and I have to do and have to remember how I like to fish. And when I forget that, I'm usually pretty unsuccessful. But if I go back to how I like to fish and what works for me, I'm usually can catch some fish. But you just have to mix those two things together. I think that's one thing that people are missing on these young anglers are the content that they've been intaking for the past 10 years of these pro anglers putting that stuff out on YouTube. So maybe that puts some color on what you were asking about the forward facing deal.
Yeah, that's a good
I
point.
mean, even like if you listen to the press conference at the Bassmaster Classic, um, a lot of these guys, they asked how big of a role did forward facing sonar play. And this was the Super Six, the five of the Super Six that was not Hamner. So and near about every single one of them that used forward facing sonar at all said that they used forward facing sonar for accurate casting, and that was about it. So I mean, it wasn't like they were marking a particular fish and watching them eat or anything like that. It was all right. That's where I want to be. Let me cast, make sure that that's the distance, and boom, got it. That's what I'm. That's the cast I'm looking for right there. So, I mean, there's so many different ways to use it, and it gets a bad rap for the like watching the fish eat it and that being the only thing. But there's just so many different ways to use it that I mean it's a tool, and it's a versatile tool.
Yeah.
But it's like it's not a it's not a video game,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah, it's not a cheat code. You do know
Cheat
have
code.
to know
That's
how
what
to
I was
use it.
looking for.
Yeah, you do have to know what you're doing in a way. I think it's like the military codes to to a nuclear weapon. In the hands of nobody knows what it is. What are you going to use it for? How are you going to apply it? In the hands of somebody that knows what it is, it can be deadly. So the same thing, somebody that knows how to use it and knows bass fishing, yes, that is going to take him to another level. Like it's going to put him at that upper echelon. What I do think it's on kayak bass fishing. Let's face it, and I'm myself included. We're not that good at it. There's a reason why we're not in the elite. So it's more of a. I think a lot of people is for detriment. Now there are people out there. UN Minor is my favorite example. UN Minor is a killer. If you don't know who your minor is, trust me, this kid. I would say right now he's a number one kayak bass fisherman in tournaments right now. I don't think there is even a doubt. Like he's been dominating for the last 3 years in some of the most talented tournament series out there. He is, I mean, he's a young guy in college who knows precisely how to use forward facing sonar on a kayak. But he'll go to Susquehanna and, on shallow water and moving water, and he'll still take your money. So it takes somebody with huge amount of talent that now knows how to use it and put it at the upper echelon. Where we're talking about AOY contention every year. Few top, maybe one or two first place finishes, bunch of top 10, top 5 finishes, and the checks that go along with it. Excuse me. But I think that's just 1% of it. Like the rest of the people that are using forward facing sonar, I don't think they're that good at it. And if I was using forward facing sonar, I would be on that group. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not dissing on anybody. I'm
Yeah,
not saying I'm better than anybody. If I would use forward facing sonar, I'd probably be skunking on every tournament because I'm not that good to apply both the knowledge and the advantage of the technology.
I
That being
think
said, go ahead.
I think the point you're making is a valid point. I think that probably hurts more people that are getting into the sport, and it probably, to spend more time on trying to figure out forward facing sonar than to spend time on flipping brush or bushes in the water and trying to learn the basic things of bass fishing. I think there are a lot of people that watch YouTube videos, and I just am going to contradict what I just said. But I just talked about how YouTube can be such a great tool, but it also can be the flip side of that. If you get these new anglers and they're watching YouTube and they're watching somebody using forward facing sonar, and if they think they can go out and buy that and you're going to shortcut the process, they're
Nope.
sadly mistaken. It doesn't work that way. You have to know how to bass fish first, and then that is a tool to help you catch more fish. But you are not going to go catch more fish by going to learning forward facing sonar if you don't know how to bass fish or teach yourself to bass fish before that. And I think that's the point you're making with the kayak tournaments is you have a lot of newer anglers that are getting into it, and they're getting a rigged out kayak, which is great. It's great for what we're doing. It's great for the sport. When people go out, buy kayaks, they buy accessories, they're filling those things up. But at the same time, we don't want them to do that for a year, get forward facing sonar, and then they're not going
Yeah.
and catching fish like they see these guys on YouTube because they tried to shortcut the process and they didn't teach themselves how to bass fish. And then you add on these other things. You add on a motor, you add on forward facing sonar. Once you learn how to paddle around and get the basics of kayak fishing and flipping and doing the things, getting in skinny water, catching fish that way, and then you can add on the forward facing sonar as a bonus. And then to touch on the Ewing Minor deal, I'm going to put Russ Snyder right there with them. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think those
Yeah.
two are neck and neck. And I think those two are probably the top two guys. And there are a whole group of probably 6 or 7 people right there with them too.
Yeah.
But I definitely think those two guys are edging people out. And then to flip all the way back to what you were asking Cam about YouTube, Ewing's brother Nolan Miner has become one of my favorite people to
Yeah.
watch on YouTube because not only is he's moved down to the Beaufort area of North Carolina, so that's an hour and probably 2 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes Cam from where we're at, something like that. And he's not only bass fishing in that brackish water, he's catching reds, he's catching trout out of the kayak, and then he's also throwing in inshore boat and he's throwing in some offshore, um, stuff in there too. And that's become one of my favorite YouTubers to watch is Nolan and how he's growing his channel. And it's really he's super engaging, and that's another one that to throw out there on that.
Oh yeah, no, he's both you and Nolan. You come from a generation like I don't know, third, fourth, fifth generation bass
Oh yeah,
fisher. So it's like they were born. They came out of the womb with a rod in their hand and a chatterbait. Pretty much, it's like it's ingrained in their DNA. That's also part of it. But yeah, I think going back to it, like the shortcuts as far as learning goes. There is no shortcuts for success, but to learn how to bass fishing, for me, starting with YouTube, watching Jim Jensen, uh, Blanchard, I forgot his first name, from
Great.
California, Greg Blanchard. I don't know why I said another Greg. Um, those it helped me a lot knowing what I was doing wrong, what I was doing right, and kind of being kind of like a speedway, if you would say, or a fast track to learning how to get not a shortcut, but learning how to bass fish. Um, Talking to Rolando Randin, another great angler from Texas, Rolando Randin was telling me about his ascent to being one of the top anglers in national tournaments. And Rolando Randin has done amazing the last couple of years as well. And he was telling me, he says, like, he says, I got forward facing sonar. He got forward facing sonar, back where it started. So there was no YouTube content creators doing videos on. He says, I like to learn on the fly. Now it's a little bit easier to learn because there's so much content out there. But it's a great time we're living where you can able to learn and progress when something you're so passionate about.
definitely.
Yeah. And I mean there's also the downside of that where, we have so much information being thrown out there by everybody. Everybody has the ability to do it. So not all the information that's given to us is good information.
Yeah.
So you also have to be careful in who you're absorbing that information from, because there are some people out there who are doing it solely for the attention and the numbers and being able to say, I am an influencer or content creator. I am teaching people how to fish. And it's like, have you ever fished anywhere other than your backyard?
It's always interesting. I mentioned it last week's podcast. I don't want to sound repetitive, but it's that thing where it's like, oh, look how fast I can catch this fish on this bait that I'm getting paid or have some type of business agreement with. There's something on their side coming in, and you're fishing out of a pond. I mean, or a small creek. Yeah, those you can throw a pest dispenser and tie a hook in it, and you'll catch a bass for the most part. But I think nowadays people are more um I think people are more educated on what social media is and what's not. Back in the days, 10 years ago, if you started doing that social media, I think you that more people drink the Kool-Aid and invest on something that it's not really all that great. But because you saw this video, and it happened to me when I started bass fishing. There were times where I was like, I look back now, it's like, man, I fell for that crap. I don't know how they got me to waste that much money in it. And I think back, like, yeah, man, they were fishing out of a neighborhood pond. Of course, they were catching it, but I didn't know any better because I just started bass fishing. But I think people are now more educated and can see that there's a little bit more transparency. That they can see this, like, yeah, it's one thing. Once, like you said, once is sharing knowledge, and once is trying to sell you a product, and it's a fine line.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a fine line, and the good people that do both of those things, it's a huge gray area. And the people that are really good at it, you can't tell one from the other. You can be watching something that's really teaching some good things, but then they're using specific products that you end up consciously or subconsciously going to purchase because these people that are teaching you are using those, and that's all part of the marketing machine that is bass fishing. And I think that's why you see these companies moving more towards content creators and then tournament anglers. And you see the tournament anglers have to supplement that by creating content of their
Yep.
tournaments, because those two things now go hand in hand. Because Used to, we were watching those tournaments on Saturday and Sunday on TV, or we were reading Bassmaster magazine or Field and Stream, and that's where we were getting, oh, I need to go buy this buzz bait because I saw it on the magazine. And now it's all based on what we're watching on YouTube, and then it is a huge gray area on the people that are really trying to teach you some good techniques. And I love it when we get on there and somebody's talking about a technique and they're like, hey man, you just use some kind of crawl bait and I use like a black one. And really, you just use whatever you want to. Like they're not trying to sell you a Guggen Squad Bandito bug or whatever the flavor is. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I like the Bandito bugs. I'm not knocking that product, but the people that are saying, like I've heard a lot of people get on there and say, you know what? I think you should carry a white, a black, and maybe a
Green
blue and a
pumpkin, yeah.
green. Yeah, and that's all you need. You don't. But now with me, you go out into the garage. I have the freaking gamut. It's a rainbow of colors of every soft plastic because I think that's what I need. Because I don't even know why, and I know that's not the truth. But even though I know that's not the truth, I still bought them at some point. So I don't know.
We all fell for it. And
Yeah,
hey,
You
listen,
look,
we go ahead, Cam. I'm sorry, I
I was
interrupted you.
gonna say, if you look in my jig box, I have black jigs, black and blue jigs, black and purple jigs, black, blue, and purple jigs, brown and purple jigs, green pumpkin purple jigs, green pumpkin orange jigs. All the that's nowhere near the number of colors that I have in my jig box. I throw a jig twice a year.
That's the, that's the
I'm the
funniest
same
part.
way. The same way.
No, I totally get that. I think we're all guilty of it. Like I'm always interested to find a new product, right? Because it's exciting to try a new product, it's like rod development. You see a lot of times working with Douglas rods. They make the great X Matrix. We were working a show with. I was working a show with them at ICAST, and it's like, hey, it's that pressure to like we have to build a new rod. Why would you build a new rod if you already feel like your rod is one of the best products out there, especially when it's proprietary design, like Frank Contine designed his own rod. But it's that marketing where you sometimes have to give in. Like if you don't have something fresh, something new, then it doesn't sell. Like we all creatures of like what we want, the what's new, what's best out there. And what's new, it's not necessarily what's best. A lot of times it's like, okay, we're gonna have to make something up to sell. Like we're gonna have to say new and improve this, new and improve that, or uh and everybody company does that in some way, shape, or form. It's just how it sells. If you're not being or giving the appearance that you're being innovative, then and the next company up is gonna outsell you. And it's just that constant. And I think as consumers, what I would my advice to people that are watching or listening are interested in either purchasing, whether it's a fish finder, a rod, a battery, a bait, a reel. One th- one thing that I would recommend is find out why it's that product is popular. Is it because so and so is using it, or is there something specific, some proper prior? I forgot the name of it.
Proprietary.
Proprietary design that either it's going to be best utilized in this scenario or outperforms the competition. And the only way to do that is not just watching a commercial or a content creator is sponsored by that company, but learning the background of it. Do your own research before you buy. Soft plastics, like you mentioned, Robert, I mean, they're out there. I think some soft plastic they do have a certain design in their appendages, for example, that'll give it a little bit more kick action, and and therefore it will probably get more bites. But to say one soft plastic is above everybody else, maybe it's more what do you call this? More durable. That's maybe one thing. Maybe
Maybe.
it's more
Yep.
durable. Okay, perfect. Maybe it has something like the Seaman TRDs. They float.
Yeah.
Not a lot of soft plastic out there is float. That's a specific design that is going to help you in some scenarios. Now, if you're going to throw a Senko, then for the love of God, don't throw a TRD worm. It's not gonna sink. It has its own niche and advantages, but the main thing as a consumer, you have to get educated and try to stop that. Uh, how do you call this? Just stop yourself from doing an impulse buy just because it looks cool or you like the content creator that's promoting it.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many biospawn baits I have in my shed right now because of Gene Jensen.
I know he used to be before he left um Catchco. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same way, as far as, the baits and what people put out. And it's the same as rods, like you were talking about. Hey, we got to come up with a new rod because that's part of the marketing machine. And, you hear people touch on that all the time, especially makers that come out with kayak specific rods. The first post you'll see is like, oh, well, what makes this a kayak specific rod?
Forward
And
facing rods.
yeah, forward facing rod. I mean, there was probably already a rod that they
Uh,
were making, but at the same time, they're running a business, and that's how that business works. And you have to put new products out. You have to keep the excitement up around whatever brand it is. And, you know, that's just that's the cycle that we live in. And that's the cycle where those people have to make a dollar to pay the people that are there making those rods to stay relevant and to stay moving their products. But that doesn't mean they're bad products either, because there are some advantages to a kayak specific rod. And as much as people like to knock companies that do that, there are some advantages to having a shorter butt. If you are somebody that is sitting down all the time and not standing up fishing, that extra 2 inches or 3 inches that is not on the butt end of that rod, it is a little bit easier to cast because you're not standing up in a boat. You're not out there whipping that thing out to the
yeah.
side. You do have it in closer to your body. So there are, specific characteristics that play into that.
And whether you like it or not, it's not the point. They designed it for that. So I give them props. I was actually talking to the good people at Cash and Rods at what is it, Bassmaster Kayak Series, the Expo. And I did, I asked him like, hey, I have made a post using their promo thumbnail, and I asked in my social media, you probably saw it on Facebook. Do you think this is a gimmick, or do you really legitimately think that this is a rod designed for forward facing sonar fishing? 90% of it was just bashing Cash and Rods.
Right.
So I did get to meet the good people at Cash and Rods, and we did get to talk about it a little bit. And I was like, let me ask you this. I'm not gonna ask you, hey, is this forward facing really? Obviously, I know what they're gonna say. They put their stamp on it. You can't back out now. But my questions were like, okay, what is it? Did you build this rod specifically for a technique that is being used for forward facing sonar, or did you take a rod design that you already had and rebrand it as forward facing sonar rods? That to me is the gimmick. Like if you already
What was
have a
their
rod
answer?
in your lineup and you just rebranding it, that's a marketing gimmick.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are gonna hate it. And as a marketing director for a company, that's something you have to wade in. It's like, yeah, on one hand, you're gonna lose credibility if people interpret it as a marketing gimmick. On the other hand, there are gonna be people that are gonna be interested. Um, which one outweighs the other?
What,
Because
what, what was their answer to the question?
they told me that they had, I think, I'm not gonna say the number of. They did tell me there were two rods that they already had designed
Mhm.
a few years ago that they did rebrand, but I think the exact number were four rods, maybe five, something like a handful of rods that they did design um for, like, I think like a Demiki rig or a, and the difference with it, I'm not I don't want to quote everything that we talked about because I'm sure I'm going to misquote them and I'm going to misrepresent what they said, and I don't want people to take that as like, oh, they said this, because I'm sure I will probably be a little cloudy on the details. But basically, I think somewhere we're like the guides, how spread apart, how many guides were actually in the rod.
Right.
Some rods were designed, it's like, okay, forward facing rods for like a demic, we're gonna add another inch to the tip of this rod because that's gonna give it a little bit better action that uh a bass fisherman using forward facing sonar would use. And that makes sense to me. I was
Right.
like, all right, that is, I'll give you props. I'll bite. I'll say that that is a rod specifically designed for facing sonar. The interesting part about it is he was I forgot the name of the gentleman, but he was telling me what they didn't like is that people took the headline and interpreted it as like, this will make your bait look uh uh they was
Show up
enhance,
more.
enhance your bait on a forward facing sonar. It says we never said that. According to, it's like, we never said that's what it's gonna do. People just automatically think forward facing sonar, oh, this is supposed to make your bait look more or enhanced on your forward facing sonar monitor.
Yeah.
And that's just lack of education. And that's
Yeah.
why I think you have to educate yourself on what is it that you're buying and what is
Yeah.
it. I know I
And
went on a tangent.
no, you're good because I'll touch on that and I'll start off by saying that neither myself or Cam are sponsored by Cash and Rods, but I will also say that where I work at is about a mile from their headquarters, so I'm in there quite a bit where they're actually making the rods. And me and Cam both have done tours of their facilities and know a lot of people that work there and know a lot of people that are sponsored by them. However, the way that rod came about was, and this is the way I understand it, and some of this is same as you, maybe a little cloudy on the details, but John Cruz tested that rod out and said, okay, for this, if you're gonna make a forward facing, they approached him and said, hey, if we're gonna make a forward facing sonar rod, what characteristics would you like in it? And so then they started building some prototypes for him to test, and then kind of probably took some stuff that they had, which is what any smart business person would do. It's like, hey, if I was gonna make one, this is where I would start. Here's 4 rods, and tell us how we can make these better. And I think that's kind of how that progressed. But then on the other side of that, the people at Cash and Rods are some of the best people that I've met, period, in any industry, not just the fishing industry. And I won't go into the details of it, but there's plenty of content out there that will go into the details of it, of what they do and how they run their company. And, uh, you know, those people are in the business world are going to be a pretty straight up, and I feel like it's a pretty good company to be aligned with for those that are aligned with them. And I have a lot of their rides, and I can't say enough good things about them. And I'll let Cam brush on that as well.
Yeah, Robert said he wouldn't go into the details, but I'll go into some of the details. I mean, so as a company, they do a Bible study weekly, and whenever you walk in, one of the first things you see is their whiteboard with their verses that they're studying right now. You're greeted super friendly. Their customer service is top notch. Uh, I took my son in there a few months back, and they let me take him back there and watch him build a rod and see what they were working on at the time. And if you go in there more than 2 or 3 times, you're on a first name basis with everybody there. And they're, like you said, just outstanding people.
Yeah.
Matt, who is the owner, just smarter than I'll ever be for sure. And just like carbon fiber and epoxy is what his PhD is in. So I mean, like Robert said, we are not sponsored by Cash and Rods, but we do love Cash and Rods.
No, it's a great company. That is for sure. And everyone that I've talked to associated with Cash and Rods has nothing but the utmost respect for what the Cash and Rods stand for. And I mentioned them just because I know they're the ones that came out. I think the first
Oh yeah,
ones. I don't know if the other ones, but the first ones that came out, at least that I saw, with forward facing sonar rods. what I would say is like when you're gonna bring a product like that out, like as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, here we go. This is gonna be interesting.
Mhm.
Let me ask a question. I'm sure it'll be great for the algorithm. And sure enough, like
Oh yeah.
everybody
Oh
and
yeah.
their mother was commenting. You have to be cautious of that if you're a marketing director for a company like that. It's like when
No,
you put
I
a
agree.
product out there like that, you have to make sure you it's
Yeah.
one thing to put a thumbnail. Which that's the difference. If you put a thumbnail saying forward facing rods and then you put the image of face on a forward facing sonar image and your rod, what are people gonna think? Oh, it's gonna your bait is gonna all of a sudden look better.
Yeah.
I think you have to initiate the marketing by explaining how you got there. Because
Mm.
let's face it, 5 people are going to listen to this podcast and going to learn what we talked about, the details that Robert and Cam talked about. That's not enough for them to change people's minds. Now, me having a conversation directly with them kind of changed my mind on what they're doing. It's like, yes, I
Yeah.
understand now. This is not gimmick. Now that you explained it, you have to market that.
Yes.
And maybe it's because I'm old.
Mm,
Like I said, I'm into my fifth decade now. I want an advertisement that teaches me why this is better. I get the beer commercials; they're great for Super Bowl, but at the end of the day, I'm going to drink the beer that I want and that I like. But it's one thing where you're selling a beer, or you're making a funny commercial for the Super Bowl. One thing when you're building a specific product, you want it to highlight. And let me tell you something. I'll give props to Catchco. I know they get a lot of hates with the Google baits and all that, but if you watch their social media, Instagram, they'll have the slides. It's like this is how we designed. I remember when they came out with their spook. This is why we designed this spook. This is why the nose of the spook is angled this way. This is why we put the beats on this side. So to me, it's like, okay, that gives me confidence. You're showing me why you believe at least that your spook is better than Striking's or Six Sense or whatever. You're showing me proof of at least of why it's different. Whether it's best or not, it's up to the angler who catches the fish. Some people are going to say, yeah, it's better. Some people are going to say it's not. But show me how it's different. I think that's I think that's the best advice you can get to a consumer.
Absolutely. And another thing to add to that is that's why it's so important to have not only, pro staff and sponsored anglers, but the right pro staff and
Yeah.
sponsored anglers. Because I know on your post about the cash and rods thing, you had Corey Dreyer coming up there and explaining things.
Yep.
You had other sponsored anglers and pro staff, I believe, coming up and giving their 2 cents and stuff. So having guys like that who know what's going on, know what they're talking about, and knowing how to use that product, and being able to explain it in such a good way. I know I read Corey's post and I thought, yeah,
He
he
nailed it. Yeah.
he did a fantastic job. So
yes.
yeah, having those people um, uh, to kind of go out and do a lot of that educating for you makes a big difference too.
Yeah. I think we're getting into an era where people are more educated now, especially with social media. I think branding is going to be, your product is going to be different than what it was for our parents generation, our generation. It's it's
Yes.
just it's evolving, and it's the consumer now are more educated because same thing, YouTube information, Google information is out there. There are always going to be people that are going to fall for the gimmick, um, and that's going to earn you a pretty check if you know how to market it. But I think, for a product to sustain and a company to sustain, it has to bring education to its consumers on why this is better, especially when we come to bass fishing. Again, a beer commercial is completely different than a real a bait or a rod commercial or marketing,
Let's
I
face
should
it.
say.
We're going to buy the beer anyway.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need an excuse.
Just, I mean, we may get guided to one brand or the other, but we're probably buying the beer.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about tournaments. Interesting developments lately. First of all, congratulations on Drew Gregory Kayak Adventure Series. I just checked their attendance for their first inaugural tournament. 77, I think it stand. I don't know if maybe a couple of people might have added. I think almost 80. I think it was 79 or 77. could have gone up by then. That is huge. When it came out, I was always wondering. I wonder what Drew Gregory feels like a good benchmark. Like, where's that line where it says, if I get so and this amount of people signing up, I'll consider it success, and if I get less than that, I consider a failure. I don't know what that number is, and I don't mean to pretend. Nor am I gonna invent one. But I'm gonna assume that almost 80 anglers in its first ever kayak venture series. That's big. That is
Uh,
attendance, and it's. I didn't think there were that many people going to sign up. I thought it'll grow to that number after by next year. But to start off the year with that number, I think that's pretty impressive.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, this is speculation, but I think if you were to ask Drew, I think the number was far less important than the experience.
Yeah,
And he wanted the whole point of this. If you listen to like all the times that he's been on Alex Rudd's podcast and other podcasts talking about it, and all the different live shows that he's done and everything talking about this,
it's been like
this
3 times on our podcast.
this was an event that was meant to be fun, meant to be fun for the whole family, meant to be, you can kind of do it however you wanted to, and it was supposed to be enjoyed. So I think if he had 10 people sign up and everyone had a blast, they all brought their families, I don't think he would have considered that a failure at all. But absolutely, congratulations on that. Also, a little side congratulations on winning the Kayak Bassmaster uh,
Yep.
Kayak Series championship there, and Bassmaster Classic for kayaks. Can't overlook that. But yeah, I love the idea of the
Kayak Adventure
Kayak
Series.
Adventure Series, and the whole like, you can fish however you want to. If you want to fish for the smallest fish you can find, go for it. If you want to, team up with somebody else, go for it. Like, however you wanted to do it, it was all about the experience and being able to fish however you wanted to. And I think having the first one uh, being an event where you can go and fish for the shoal bass, which is on a lot of people's bucket list,
Yeah.
that was just icing on the cake. Like, had to make like that had to have made a big difference in the numbers, in my opinion.
Yeah, but by the way, he marketing genius, Drew Gregory, marketing genius when it comes to that, and and I mean this in a complimentary way. You can't get him to shut up about it. Like, even when I had him on the podcast, I was like, "Good Lord, Drew, I want to talk about the Bassmaster Kayak Series and you win. I'll let you talk about the Kayak Venture Series, but please don't let it take over the episode." Um, and again, I say that I'm making fun, but I say it in the utmost respect way. That's what he's supposed to do. I mean,
Yes.
hey, that's how you do it, man. That's how you do marketing.
Yeah.
Just don't shut up about it.
And
Yeah.
there are
Get people attention.
there are a few people that whenever you have them on your show, like, you can just say, go, walk out
Yeah.
the room, come back in an hour, you've got a podcast. I think Drew is one of those people, Chad Hoover is one of those people. You're one of those people. Like, I feel like Alex Rudd's one of those guys.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of those guys that I am not one of those people. I might could make it happen, but I am not. But yeah, I'm definitely definitely excited for Drew, and to see what that does for our sport. I think it can only do a lot of good. But I'll let Robert talk about it too.
Yeah, no, I think that you're exactly right on a marketing genius, and that's what he went to school for, was sports marketing and event marketing. And I think he
I thought he went
utilized.
for sports medicine.
I'm pretty sure it was sports and event marketing. I could be
Oh yeah.
wrong. I'm
You
just
could.
going off
I'm probably wrong. It's usually, if
memory.
somebody's wrong, it's probably me. So go ahead. I'm
Uh,
sorry. I
but no, you're
digress.
fine. But whether he went to school for it or not, he did a great job of promoting that event. I think he also did a great job of finding a niche that of people that he was
Yeah.
trying to pull from that was different than what Hobie and Bassmaster, and it's even different than the local club scene. because I think the local clubs I think have gotten better as I think more local clubs are following the footprint that Hobie and Bass and some of KBF, what they have laid the foundation for the past 3 or 4 years. I think that's made the local clubs get better on how they're putting events on, and I actually think the local club participation and the competition there has probably hurt some of the national trails because I think people are saying, you know what, I can be people are saying I can get beat right here in my backyard the same as traveling 500 miles to get beat. I mean, that's really what we're talking about is there is great competition that is right here, and I don't have to go 500 miles and put that big entry fee up to get my head caved in because there's 30 anglers or 40 or 50 anglers right here. So I think Drew did a great job on finding a niche of that he's trying to pull from of family of hey, I can take my whole family to this. There's something for the kids.
Yeah.
I can do a team just like Cam said. I can do smallest fish, and I really think that that is probably going to grow our sport as much or more as
Yeah.
some bigger national trails because if you think about the people that are going to get into it, what would you be looking for? Well, number one, probably not the right approach is to go buy a $5,000 or $6,000 Hobie PA whatever and then try to explain to your wife that you're about to drive 500 miles to spend $250 to get your head beat in by people that have been doing this a long time. But a better approach is like, hey, you know what? Let's go grab a couple kayaks. We're going to throw them in the truck and we're going to go to this kayak adventure series. And hey, you know what? Bring the
Yeah.
kids too. We're going to camp out. We're going to make it a family weekend. And what a great way to get people involved in our sport. And what a great way for men and women out there if your significant other maybe they're not an angler but you know what they can go camping and have a great time or you can stay in a hotel and they can go shopping at these things and they can come to the events and you know there's a lot of events that I've was and am a part of that I'm sending pictures back to my wife and saying, man, you know, you'd really like it because I met these cool people and we did this and we grilled burgers last night. We had such a great time around the campfire. And there are times I want to share that with her, but it's like, you know, you in a tournament scene, you can't get your kayak ready and you can't get your kids or your wife's kayak ready and be competitive because I've tried that route too and it doesn't work. There's just so much that goes into that to be competitive on a national level. And it's all you can do to take care of yourself and your stuff and where am I going and what am I doing and how am I pre-fishing. You can't split your time. But with this kayak adventure series, who cares, man? Go fish for small fish. Go fish, have a good time. Fish Friday afternoon, fish Saturday, do the after event on Sunday. You know, go and have a great time. I think it is an awesome event, and I hope it keeps growing. And I am super impressed with the numbers they pulled for the first event.
Yeah.
And what an awesome idea to not say uh, not say um, we are fishing, we're having a tournament on this lake, but we are having a tournament in this radius, all public waters
I
accessible.
love it.
Like I love that. Like somebody wants to trudge through some navigable water that from one public access and find some crazy little swamp in the middle of nowhere, they can do that. And if they want to go off the boat ramp and go slug out with the bass boats for forward facing sonar fish, they can do that too. Like however you want to do it, like whatever your strong suit is, like you're not bound to one specific body of water or anything like that. So I think that's a phenomenal idea too.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of it has to do with money. It's whether you like to admit it or not. Like you're gonna have these two crowds, right? You're gonna have the Bassmaster Kayak Series crowd, and I'm one of them. I'm not saying anything bad about anybody that loves that. I love to be hyper competitive. I love to put my money on the line, put my mouth where my money is, and go forward and see who's the best angler in the next 2 days. I love that. That to me is fun. Doing that is fun, even though 99% of the time I'm going to be coming up in the losing end. And at the end of the year or at the end of the season, I'm probably out thousands of dollars instead of winning thousands of dollars. That being said, there's that crowd that loves that hyper competitive. I talked about it at the beginning. A lot of it is just anglers that love tournament fishing, but don't want to do it, don't want to invest on a boat. Kayak, bass fishing, or a kayak is that middle of the road where it's like, I'm not a bank fisherman. I can actually go and fish a tournament. I can be on the water, and I don't have to invest literally tens of thousands of dollars. Whereas a boat with kayak anglers right now are investing 5,000, maybe 10,000, but not 20,000. I mean, anybody out there is 20,000. Good, uh, salute to you. But then there's the bigger audience of kayak fishermen that just want to have fun, love the camaraderie, and have enjoyed it through grassroots local tournaments, but now get to do it on a more national kind of trail that you can, like you said, go to Shoaley. Like, I've never fished for Shoaley. That's on my bucket list. Now it's a great excuse for somebody to say, hey, I'm going to get on my truck, take my kayak, take the family, and enjoy this weekend vacation where I'm gonna actually be with my family. Whereas if you're in a tournament setting of a Bassmaster Kayak Series or a Hobie BOS, you're there to fish. You're not there to have fun. You're not there to drink till 2 in the morning. You're not out there to party. You're out there to fish. And if you're not doing that, if you're not pre-fishing for 2 or 3 days, for the most part, there's always one or two people that actually go into a lake and actually win it, but that's few and far between. But if you're not investing the entry fees, the Airbnbs, the gasoline, the time away, your vacation days, pre-fish 2 or 3 days, you know, all day, go to bed early, get rig up, that is exhausting in a way. And to me, that's fun. But for the majority of the population in this kayak fishing community, it is not. And that's why you'll see the kayak adventure series, and it, in hindsight, it shouldn't surprise us they're that successful. You got the other one that's kind of similar in a way that brings the fun aspect to it is the Native Big Bass Power Hour. Smaller investment, huge prices. I mean, literally, you can come away with a $5,000 kayak by just catching one bass, or multiple, or catching the most amount of bass. It is a fun tournament with minimal investment, and that's why you see like Portland getting 100 and plus anglers. Who would have thought a national tour in Portland would get 100 anglers for kayak bass fishing? Because nobody that's up in that area, or at least most of it, are interested in taking part of a national trail. They just want to have fun. Same thing in California. They're targeting places where national trails struggle to get 50 people, and they're getting 150. Talking about the Native Bass Power Hour again, because it's fun. And I see now this is leading up to what I wanted to talk next. This is a good segue. Is the downfall to this, like the loser in all of this, I feel, and I say that not because I'm happy about it, not because, uh, but the reality is the Hobie BOS right now. I'm gonna look up the stats right now for this weekend in Texas, which usually draws 100 and plus people. Let me refresh the screen. Actually, it had 44. It dropped down to 43 anglers. That is concerning for
Yeah.
that trail.
So I think, moving forward, like I agree with what you're saying as far as the number wise. So first, I'll go back and let's talk about the West Coast because, and I've kind of touched on this on our podcast some. Um, a lot of the way people think about kayak fishing comes from what they hear and listen to, and a lot of the driver of that is Kayak Bass Nation. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of the reason that people think that California is not supportive of, and I'm not saying their podcast. I'm saying the Facebook page that Kayak Bass Nation as a whole, and that is everybody in the kayak space who's commenting on posts, who's posting things on Facebook. I'm not talking specifically about the Kayak Bass Nation podcast, Ryan Lambert or Jeff Malott. I'm not talking about those guys. I'm talking about it as a whole. And that's what they built that for, and so people could voice their opinions and not be banned by other tournament organizations. That's what it's there for. I think it's a great platform and it serves its purpose. But some of the side effects of that are
Yeah.
that platform is so big that it does help shape what people think about certain issues in
And
kayak fishing.
influences. Yeah.
And California anglers and their participation is one of those. And now we talk about, okay, they're not supporting national trails, but besides KBF, which almost, you can't put in the same category as Bassmaster, Hobie, Big Bat, Native Big Bass, and probably now Kayak Adventure Series. You can't put it up there with those anymore, I feel like. And that's
No.
just from me looking on the outside of it because I just don't feel that way. That's not from KBN or anything else. It's just kind of the way that it is now. But when's the last time that one of the big trails has been out there? And I know you just said Portland and the kayak, the native big bass thing drew how many ever, 100 or something you
Probably
said.
like 150 or something like that.
I'm going to tell you right now, if Hobie or Bass went out there right now, they would they would probably pull 200 plus
No.
because yes,
You
I am
you think
telling
so?
you, yes, sir, because those dudes out there are participating in those local trails. And I'm telling you, there's a big following out there. And that's why you're seeing those numbers in the Native Big Bass series out there. And you think that people aren't going to follow what Greg Blanchard and everybody else in his group and people are doing out there? And Shane Lamont, I mean, there's a big contingency of West Coast anglers that are participating in some of these. Some of them are even driving out here to participate. So I think if when those tournaments do decide to go back, I think those dudes are going to show up and they're going to kind of tell everybody like, hey, it's been a long time that we've been left out of the mix, except for the native deal, which I applaud native for going out there. I think
Yeah.
those dudes are going to show up the next time Bass or Hobie goes. And now flip back to Hobie. I think that AJ and Steve are going to have to get together, and I think it's probably a mistake to have 2 or 3 Texas events because you had the national. Now I may be wrong about this, but I'm thinking the Bassmaster at the Classic was Texas as well. Is that right, or Oklahoma? Where
Oklahoma.
was it?
Yeah,
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
So
Next year it's
I
going
mean,
to be in Texas.
you're right there, Texas, Oklahoma, and then you have Possum Kingdom Bassmaster, and then you have a Hobie event following that in Texas. I just think you got to put that Hobie event somewhere else because I mean you're looking at a lot of time off. You're looking at a lot of entry fees paid by that area of anglers. And how many times can you? If there were 3 right here in Raleigh or Santee or Charlotte that I could get to, I would be choosing 1 or 2. I couldn't do 3 of them in the same area within 2 months back to back. So I think it's a scheduling issue as far as that number you're seeing for Hobie. It's the last of those 3. So I just think they have to do a little bit better. And those guys work great together. We've talked to Steve. I've talked to AJ. Um, and both of those are top-notch guys, and they'll
Yeah.
they'll put their heads together and figure it out. But I just think it's a scheduling issue that those dudes are going to have to say, okay, I'm in Texas here. Where are you planning on going? And maybe, if that Hobie event this weekend was, let's say, Virginia somewhere or Florida or Alabama, somewhere where you're not pulling from that core 100 people that are coming from 200 miles or less. I just think having 3 things back to back in Texas that's what you're seeing on the Hobie
4
side.
actually.
Well, 4, yeah, and then
Well,
there may be others that I don't know, and I'm sure there's local events going on top of that.
oh yeah.
It's just you have so much in one area as far as national events go. I think it's oversaturated in that time frame, and that just should have been, and there's a ton of other things that are involved. Schedule it better. I'm just kind of from a 20,000-foot view. Here's kind of the reason why I think that happened. And then if they get together and they're in different areas of the country, and then they switch, and there's a couple months in between, and then Hobie goes back to Texas, Bassmaster somewhere else, then I think you see those numbers are pretty competitive.
I think it's kind of like the gold rush effect, back in, I don't know, frontier times, with California, when they found gold and everybody's just like, I think that was what happened with kayak bass fishing. Texas blew up, and every tournament decided we need to go to Texas. We need to invest in Texas. That's where it's at. And now it's saturated. Now I think it's spread it thin to a point where it's like now anglers are saying, well, I can't do all of them. And I'm one of them. Like, I kind of wanted to go to Wright Patman, especially because I don't need a motor and I don't have motor on my kayak, which I'm hoping to change that in the next few weeks. But I think there's little different things that has affected Hobie BOS. And AJ, Steve Fields, they do a great job with it. It's easy to be the armchair quarterback it, and say, well, they should have done this, they should have done that. I get it. The fact of the matter is just two people that have been very successful in building the Hobie BOS brand and a lot of success. And it kind of is worrisome, especially here in Texas, how the numbers. I mean, it's not a gradual decrease. It's actually a pitfall drop off. We're talking about from almost 200 anglers in Ray Roberts to all of a sudden earlier this year, now we had less than 100, and Wright Patman not even 50. A couple of things I think is the hike in price for entry fees. That I again, I love Steve Fields, I love AJ, but as a consumer, I feel like, why am I spending $300 on a tournament where I got two tournaments for Hobie BOS I can go. Each of them is $300. Well, guess what? Bassmaster Kayak Series is coming too, and they also have two tournaments in Texas this year, and it's 250. So when you look at it, you're like, and again, it's little things. It's not. I don't think there's one particular thing that caused this massive drop off. I think it's five anglers from here are no longer supporting this trail for this reason. Another five here, another five there. Because I think what has happened with Hobie BOS, and a lot of it's not their fault. It's things out of their control that has happened especially in the Bassmaster Kayak Series in 2022, when it almost, when it was just a shambles. And we're not going to go into how and why that's not here or there, but it's just the reality of how it ended. And that forced changes in rules that affected Hobie BOS more than any trail, because they're the ones that didn't allow motors. You put those launching designated launches, portaging rules, navigation, whatever kind of rules, and and on this trail that allows motor, it's not that big of an issue. Then you put it on a trail that didn't allow motors, now it's kind of an issue, because now, okay, you wanted that spot where you no longer can launch out of that bridge, that's public land. You're gonna have to launch at for the most part, a lot of times was gonna be on a ramp that was 5 miles away. And now how are you gonna get to that spot? I think that was part of it. Again, let's say there's 10 anglers decided that they're going to stop supporting because it's no longer convenient for them to do it. And then the increase in price, all of a sudden all this trails coming out to Texas, Native Bass Power Hour, capitalizing on the popularity in Texas, Bassmaster Kayak Series, Texas Bass Nation. Now you're spreading a thing. It's only so much money that goes around. That's why you kind of see the Christine Fishers of the world, the Guillermo Gonzalez, Matthew Scotch of the world. Those are people that have sponsorship that do kind of offset the cost. They have that support group of companies that help them out. They actually catch checks every now and then, and that kind of you catch a $10,000 check on a tournament, which is not unheard of. That's pretty much what you on a national trail that has 150 anglers, $10,000 first place, or even $5,000 second place, and you see anglers one check. That's it. You have your budget for the rest of the season, right? With that money, it's like, all right, now I can fish every tournament, because you never go thinking it's like this is gonna pay my bills. This money is just it's like found money. So I'm gonna go fish the rest of it because now I have that money to go with it. So it's different things that I think that affected it. And it's sad to see because I love Hobie BS and I love their brand, but I kind of understand. I see how things have moved in a certain way and how it's affected them. And it may just be that right now we only have room for one really major national trail that has AOI implication, and that's the Bassmaster Kayak Series.
Yeah, I think the one of the things with Hobie is, they were top dog for a little bit, but then once Bassmaster Kayak Series figured out
That they need to
what
hire
they
Steve
were
Owens.
doing, and once they got Steve Owens running things, now not only is it a well-run tournament, but it is the well-run tournament that or trail that gives you an opportunity to put your name into the mix to be able to walk across the Bassmaster Classic stage.
Which is everybody's dream.
If you have ever had an inkling of tournament fishing in your blood, that is the goal. So that is the thing. So now that is well run, then now, like, if you have to choose one, I'm choosing the one that gives me the the ability to roll the dice to see if I can walk across the Bassmaster Classic stage.
Yeah. TOC pays almost twice as much as the classic. Keep calling it the classic, the kayak championship. It's not
Right.
the money. It's not the money. Like what the TOC pays like 50, 45, $50,000. The kayak championship pays $25,000. A lot of it is like none of these anglers do it for the money.
If you were doing it
The
for
money's nice, don't get me wrong, but when I think about winning a tournament, I think about being there with my peers and being able to go toe to toe with Russ Snyder. I see that in respect, not as talking trash or egocentric or anything. It's a self accomplishment. It's a self satisfying accomplishment to go out there, fish against Guillermo Gonzalez, Christian Fisher, Russ Snyder, Cody Milton, and be able to go to toe with them. It feels great. And yes, the $10,000. Trust me, I would love to win, but it could be $5,000, and I still feel just as happy and joyful if I would be successful at it. So now nobody's doing it for the money, in my opinion. Go ahead.
No, I agree totally with what both you guys are saying. I think the Bassmaster Championship, definitely that's the media marketing machine that everybody wants to be a part of, and that you want to be able to walk across that stage. You want to be able, honestly, at this point, you want to be able just to qualify to go to
Qualify,
that,
yeah.
because now it's a lot harder than it was just a few years ago. And I kind of saw that writing on the wall, and North Carolina was one of the states where they just had an end of the year championship. Anybody could go. I think it was 2021. I think there was 35 people signed up for the North Carolina championship that was on Lake Norman. So that means the top 10% was going to go to the championship. I was 2 inches out of third place. I came in sixth, and I knew at that point that they were probably going to be making some changes. There were already talking points going across that they needed somebody better to run it, yada yada yada. And I kind of thought at that point, when I didn't make that, I was like, that may have been my best opportunity to get there. And now what it's turned into is, this year is, they can't go back and rewrite the rules for this year, but I think next year you're going to have to see probably some changes on the number of people that can go, because now you have people qualifying through the Bassmaster Series, and then you still have these state qualifiers.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to have a huge, for this 2024 coming up, I think you're going to have a large number of people that are qualified for that. I don't know how many will actually show up and go, but you're probably going to be looking at trying to cap some numbers on some of that, because there's going to be a point where Do you let it go like some of these high school tournaments and have 400 people go to it? I don't think that's the right move.
Nope. Kind
You
of
know, so
KBF route.
yeah, so I think you're going to look at some of that, and I think Hobie with a new motor partnership that they have this year. I think you'll see some things change on that front next year for them, as you did this year, with the exception of Norman and Wright Patman are still no motors. But I think next year that all of those will be motors. I think that plays a part in it as well. I think that kind of muddied the waters for them a little bit, just leaving two that were non-motor, and
And
there are other.
that might be why this tournament has such a low numbers. This is
Yeah,
Well,
it
that's
could be
clear
definitely.
that
That's another
I
factor.
do.
Yes.
motor.
Yeah, I do think that as this sport grows and evolves, that I mean, would you go fish a bass boat tournament with just a trolling motor? No. I mean, no. I want to be able to crank that motor up and run the whole lake, and it's kind of the same thing for kayaks. Do you want to fish a tournament where you're limited to I can paddle 3 miles, but man, that's going to be I'm probably going to be tired as crap, or maybe there's some people in better shape than me that can paddle much further, but or would I rather hit the button and go where I want to go and ride 6 or 7 miles and fish an area? I'm just as it progresses, things change, and I think Hobie will adapt, and I think they'll get the schedule where it's in different parts and not kind of follow each other. Um, and I think they'll be just fine. But yeah, it is a little dip on that, but I think they'll bounce back, learn from it, make the adjustments they need to make as they have in the past, and keep moving forward.
I think it's again hindsight's 2020. Playing armchair quarterback is easy, but having said that, I think it's you mess with the formula. Like when you think about it, 2 years ago they were selling out tournaments.
Mm.
Now it was a little bit of a fool's gold because you could get a refund, a full refund if you decided to back out at the last minute. So a lot of them were getting um, sold out and then ended up with less than the maximum, but still at more than 100. Um, and then you go back to like, well, now instead of letting you have your instead of doing that, they went the opposite route. Now it's like we're going to increase the price, and if you don't sign up by this time, we're going to tack on another $30 if you decide you want to sign up late. And I think there's people out there that are consumers. There are people that are just out there consumers, just like I am, just like you are, you guys are. And as a consumer, when you feel betrayed by a company, or you feel like, man, you're putting me on a tough position, I'm no longer going to use your services or your products. And that's the thing is, again, it's hindsight is 2020. It's easy for me to criticize from this part. And again, I love AJ. I love what Steve Fields are doing, and I do hope that the Hobie POS, rekindles that the 2020 2021 season, 2022 season that they had, because it was the best run tournament out there. It was as closest to having an elite series that we've had on kayak bass fishermen. It is what pushed Bassmaster Kayak Series to make changes. Like they set the bar high, and everybody needed to catch up. Bassmaster Kayak Series said like we need to get Steve Owen on board, or this is going nowhere. That's the good thing about having an organization that sets the bar high. I'm sorry, the bar high. Here we go. Um, that being said, for whatever reason, I guess some of it again rule changes that had to be in place that kind of affected them more than other motorized tournaments, and now they changed to motorized to motor tournaments, but at the same time they didn't by allowing two of the trails to not have a motor. It's symptoms of what happened to KBF. Golden age of KBF, you had like 400 plus people sign up for their national championship. It was the best thing out there, and then changes started coming. Every changing format, changing rules, changing payouts, and when you lose that consistency, it has a trickle down effect in your attendance, in my opinion.
Another thing you got to remember, Armando, whenever you look at the golden age of Hobie BOS, like you were talking about,
Pandemic.
the world looked very different.
Yes, that's true.
There were a lot of people who could make as many tournaments as they wanted to because they could create their own schedule because they were working from home. So they could work, 40 hours Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and travel Thursday, Friday, and fish the tournament. And since then, a lot of those people have gone back to the
Yep.
office or at least gone to a hybrid schedule or something where they're not able to really make their own schedule anymore. And that I think that has a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah.
Um, but uh, but we had a bunch of people who had a lot of extra time and a little bit of extra money went and bought kayaks, and now they have they don't have that extra time and or extra money. So we have kind of had a little bit of a dip there as well, where a lot of these people who were trying to go out and say, I can afford to do these tournaments and put my name in with the big dogs, and now they're had to sell the kayak, or we not able to travel, or not able to do that for whatever reason. So um, a lot of it is the consistency, a lot of it is the rule changes, a lot of it is a lot of the other things that we've talked about. But I think you do have to remember that 2-3 years ago, um, there was we were a little bit farther away from normal than we are now.
I agree in a way, but I also think 2 or 3 years ago there was no Bassmaster Kayak Series and KBF was struggling. Now Bassmaster Kayak Series is pulling the numbers that Hobie BOS was pulling 2 or 3 years ago. So it's not like the whole community has gone down. Um, when you think about it, when you put it in a vacuum, it's like you're right in what you're saying. Like the overall size of the community has shrunk to maybe the point where it's no longer sustainable to have more than one national trail that competes for an AOY. I say that because Native Bass Power Hour is kind of like a national trail, but it's its own thing. There's no AOY competition. Kayak Adventure Series, I think they have an AOY, but I don't think anybody that goes, or very few people that actually taking part of it. And again, this is their first tournament this weekend, is really interested in the AOY thing. I think they're more interested in having the fun aspect. So while you're right in that, the thing that kind of goes against, I guess, your argument would be, well, if that's the case, then why are there three trails coming up and making the audience, or the audience or the participation that Hobie BOS used to have back 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, for sure. And that's a really good point. And I will to that point, I will say that's why I have Robert on the podcast, because I don't keep up with tournament stuff and he does. Anytime it's tournament stuff, I usually just defer to Robert.
Yes, I mean, all those points, I think it's all a part of the equation. If you say some of those parts aren't, you're just fooling yourself. I think that when Hobie was pulling 225, whatever they were pulling, the Bassmasters, well, Steve Owens wasn't running it, and I'll just leave that at that.
Yep.
Um, I think that KBF had already started having less numbers. And I think that was a great opportunity for Hobie to pull in everybody they could, because let's face it, the most of the top anglers are fishing all of those anyway, at some level. Um, and that really, I think where the number swing is the how many local people are you pulling, or how many people are you pulling from a couple states over. Um,
Yep.
I did the map diagram for Lake Murray for Steve Owens for
Oh yeah, that was
Bassmaster,
good.
and it was really eye opening for me, because I updated it once it got rolling. I updated it every couple of days, and looking and seeing where people were coming from and traveling to Lake Murray for that, and I don't even remember off the top of my head what the final number was, but it was over 220. It was between 225 and 250. It was a ridiculous number of people that were at Lake Murray, but they were pulling people from all over the United States. Um, and the Hobie was the same way the year before or 2 years before that. There's a lot of different factors, and I think Wright Patman was, like I said, it's just saturated at that area of the country for that time. I'll be interested to see what Cayuga does next month for Hobie
Yeah.
BOS. I think there's probably that Northeast contingent is going to show up for that. So we're just going to have to see how it goes. And I think, the price point probably does play a role. But at the end of the day, $250, $300, you already spent 5 or 6 on a kayak. I'm not sure that $50 is really that's the real reason where somebody's swing is. Now it may play a part. It may play a part in the overall. Like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know. Do I want to go chase this trail and 3 times at $300 a pop, or do I want to try to go chase Bassmaster at 250? Because at that point you're at 900 and 750. So if you're thinking about that, and it's $150 swing, so all of those things play a role, but I do think that AJ and Steve Fields will, make adjustments and move forward, and
Yeah.
that's why they're where they are, and anything worth good is you have to make adjustments to. So I think they'll do that and keep moving forward, and I think you'll see in the future that Hobie BOS and Bassmaster they're going to be both going to be fine. I
Yeah.
think there's room for both.
And and before I let you guys go, because I know I had you for for almost 2 hours, and you guys are an hour ahead of me. So you guys, I can tell Robert's already getting tired. But yes, closing thoughts. Like I said, I think there's not one single thing that is causing this massive drop off. I just think it's a combination of here, 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 and that is what happens when there's so many changes in rule formats, in you know uh, formats in general, in payouts, in entry fees. That's why you see there's little here, little there, because it's not just one specific thing that you can point at and say this is why. If I would have to pick, the biggest reason is like the community may not be as sustainable to put 200 anglers on 2 national trails, and the Steve-O effect is what's maybe pushing the needle more than anything else, more than the motors, more than the formats, maybe more than the rule changes, more than the cost of um, of entry fees. It's that Steve Owens now has the trust of the people. Like, everybody loved the Bassmaster, would love to be part of the Bassmaster kayak series, whereas 2 years ago they just didn't trust it. That's why they struggled to get 50 people there. There was too many consistencies, and I'm not gonna deal into it because that's neither here or there. But Steve Owens got the trust of the people, and now they see it's like, yes, I would always wanted to fish a Bassmaster event, whether it's a boat or a kayak. I can't afford a boat, so yes, I'll do it out of a kayak because it's my childhood dream. I think the Steve Owen effect is what's moved the needle more thing than another. And I'm sure it's nothing that Steve Owens is like, yeah, I'm gonna take down Hobie BOS. Obviously, it's not that. Those guys work in conjunction. And again, I want both the Hobie BOS and the Kayak Adventure Series and the Native Bass Power and the Bassmaster Kayak Series to all pull 200-300 anglers on each event, because the more the merrier. The more this grows, the better the community is going to be and the industry as a whole. But we've talked about this for an hour and 45 minutes. I don't want to keep you guys up, so I'll leave you guys have the final word and plug in anybody that you want to plug that has helped you in your kayak fishing adventures, and or any companies that has helped you sponsor your podcast and your kayak fishing adventures.
Yeah, I'll go first. I'll let Cam close it out. So I don't really have a whole lot of sponsors. I mean, my wife are putting up with my kayak bass fishing shenanigans, and I'll let Cam go over the podcast sponsors. But check out the podcast, Faith and Fishing. It's on all the media platforms. Instagram for me is Outdoors to Go. So you can find me on Instagram, YouTube. Same thing, Outdoors to Go on YouTube. There's some tournament videos and other stuff up there, and then I'll let Cam close it out.
All right. Yeah. So, like he said, Faith and Fishing podcast on all the platforms. We just give anglers an opportunity to share their story, tell us what they believe in, how they came to believe that. Faith stories, fishing memories, and positivity is kind of our brand there. Every week we have a podcast come out. So in terms of social media, you can follow the podcast at Faith and Fishing Pod on Instagram and Faith and Fishing Podcast on Facebook and YouTube. And for me, the Clumsy Kayak Angler on Instagram. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The Faith and Fishing Facebook group is another place community that you can join and have we pray for each other, and we keep each other updated on how things are going in our fishing journeys and our faith journeys. As far as companies that we work with, so personally, I am on pro staff with Carolina Waters, which is a lifestyle and apparel brand based here in the Carolinas. They have the UPF sun shirts, the hoodies, the hooded UPF sun shirts, all that good stuff. And we've been working on some new products that are going to be coming out soon that we're excited about. And then I will say I don't get an opportunity to plug them a lot because given our brand is not something that we talk about much. But on this podcast, it just feels right. So I'm going to talk about Trophy Brewing here in Raleigh, North Carolina. So they are kind of our beer of choice here. We like their beer, but the big thing is the people. They supplied our wedding with beer as our wedding gift. So like we always, anytime we get a chance to support them, they've been huge to us. So, I wanted to give them a plug. But then as far as companies that are, working with the podcast, Omnia Fishing, we've got Jade's Jigs, which does lead-free finesse tackle. Then we've got Mr. B Lure Company that does, bladed jigs, regular like flipping jigs, arky jigs, underspins, spinner baits, buzz baits, all that good stuff. Pretty much any of the skirted baits, you can do that. And then let's see, Nakwa Adventure Gear is our newest sponsor to come on board. They are sponsoring our What's Your Favorite segment, and they have lithium batteries that fit in the palm of your hand. So I can run my fish finder and all my cameras. I have a 10 amp hour battery and a 20 amp hour battery for those, and it's a total of 6 pounds for those two batteries. So let's see, Savior Outdoors has been with us the longest. And we love them and their rod retrieval devices. And then the last one, unless I'm missing somebody, is Get Outdoors Pedal and Paddle in Greensboro, North Carolina. They're paddle and bike shop. So kayaks, canoes, bikes, all that good stuff. So did I miss anybody, Robert?
I hope not.
Good. Good to go.
All right, guys, thank you so much for taking the time. I apologize for keeping you so long. I know it's really
you're
late
fine.
for you guys, but I really appreciate you taking the time to the podcast, and look forward to all your content. Wish you the very best. Hope we get to see you on the water soon. For those out there listening, go check out our great companies that support our podcast: North Elysium, Douglas Outdoors, Dark Horse Tackle, Catch Outdoors, and Mariner Sales. Have a great day, everyone. Have a great weekend. If you're taking part in the Kayak Adventure Series or the Hobie BOS, good luck to you all. Stay safe and wear your PFDs. So long, everyone. And done.